Incoming House Democratic Caucus Chair Hakeem Jeffries of New York joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. Welcome and congratulations on what is going to be your new job.
Thanks so much, and great to be with you.
What do the Democrats have planned for when they take control of the House and the legislative power that comes with it? And the context of this is something Karen just said, that Democrats won on the basis of conversations about health care, about jobs, about the economy. But the first thing we see is a fight about a shutdown and the border.
Well, the fight about the shutdown and the border falls squarely within the Republican complete control of government right now. They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Democrats don't want to shut down. We want to fund the government so we can get about doing the business of the American people. And what we've said in our conversations over the last several months, in conversation with the country all across the nation, is that we have a for the people agenda. We're going to fight to lower health care costs, to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, to protect people with pre-existing conditions, to lower the high cost of prescription drugs, to increase pay for everyday Americans through a real infrastructure plan where we're going to invest $1 trillion, create 16 million good-paying jobs, fix our nation's crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, mass transportation system, and we're going to work to clean up corruption in Washington, D.C. to bring our democracy to life. That's our For the People agenda. Those are the promises that we've made to the American people. We plan on delivering upon those promises when we assume the gavels on January 3rd.
So let me ask you this. On Friday night, we got all that information about Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. Tonight, perhaps we're going to get some information on Michael Flynn. At some point, the mantle of impeachment hangs over this president. In fact, CNN yesterday was saying that Trump is concerned about being impeached, and a source says he sees it as a real possibility. How do you confront that, Representative?
Well, the House of Representatives is a separate and co-equal branch of government. We have an Article I constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch, and we'll take those oversight responsibilities seriously. At the same time, there's an ongoing criminal investigation that's taking place, and we have to allow that to play itself out, to allow Bob Mueller to continue to conduct himself in a way that has been professional, that has been highly focused, that has been disciplined, and that is allowing the facts and the evidence to lead to whatever conclusions he eventually reaches. We have to simply let Bob Mueller be Bob Mueller. When he completes his investigation, then we can allow him to report that to the Department of Justice, to Congress, to the American people, and we can decide what, if any, appropriate actions need to be taken thereafter.
You heard David Jolly say nobody wins in a shutdown. He's seen them on both sides. Donald Trump continues to insist he wants $5 billion for this wall he says is being built. That's nowhere near where Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi want to go. Is there any circumstance you can see in which Democrats give more money for this border wall?
I don't envision any circumstance where we allocate $5 billion or anything even close to that, because it will be a waste of taxpayer dollars. And what we saw earlier today was a complete embarrassment. Donald Trump is a performance artist. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are serious legislators. He showed up clearly wanting to perform, to put on a reality show for the American people. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were there to get something done. And we continue to be here to get something done, to fund the government. That's our responsibility. The Republicans right now have complete control of government. They need to be the individuals to get it done. But we want to do it in a responsible fashion. And if they need our votes in order to fund the government, then we have to have a meeting of the minds in terms of our values. And I think it was Donald Trump who promised that Mexico was going to pay for this wall. So go negotiate with Mexico. Don't waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money in order to build something that will not make our border more secure. It will be wasteful, and we could be spending that money to improve the quality of life of working families, middle-class folks, senior citizens, the poor, the sick, and the afflicted in our nation.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, good to see you. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.